Well, yes, I've said before that I experienced being concerned about poverty, so I was drawn to economics. But I found there's no shortage of resources from the point of view of avoiding what we take to be extreme poverty in the world. There's enough resources for 3 or 4, 5 times the population that's on the planet. It's not that we have too much people in that sense. We waste our resources on using them for the rich, basically. So I thought the answer might be political, so I attended to that and found that yes, our political system is wanting. It's easily a prey to self-interest, and therefore the self-interest of those that are the most powerful. That power might be sourced in, finance control, land ownership, even hereditary privilege, and so on. So I became interested in psychology in particular, the philosophy that attends itself to trying to understand man. In a sense, one could say sociology as well, that how does society tick? What's the structure? What are the norms and values that may be dominating it? And hopes and dreams. At some point I realized that religion in large measure attended to this before we had the scientific age. And much of religion has existed for a very long time, and in a sense, perhaps some of its core ideas and that go back a very long time, that they've developed as religion developed through the years, through the millennia. That seemed to be the sort of interest that might lead to a greater understanding of our situation. It attended itself to the religion I'm talking about, attended itself especially to the nature of man and whether it was fallen nature and so on, whether he's developing, whether the world and society is intimately linked with what people are born into and take as their values, and perhaps we're, if you like, a victim of this, and this is where we need to make the change. Yes, you could say it in society, but that it makes change at the individual level of who we are. I mean, I found that like economics and politics and philosophy and study of business, and so forth, and history and religion sort of had the answers at each stage, or seems to have. But in spite of the understanding, then the world, well, it does seem to get better. You would much prefer to live now than as say, a medieval peasant or a citizen of Rome wasn't that good either. A Roman soldier, life expectancy about 32 years. Would I like to have been a savage Norseman? Well, we got the view that they were savage anyway. Vikings and so on. It doesn't look a happy situation. I mean, neither for the warrior nor the wife and kids left at home. Life looks pretty terrible in history. But that in some sense one could say, well, it's always been a mix of good and bad, and perhaps it's all relative as well. You can be just as happy or unhappy, perhaps, in any society. Perhaps according to your rank and station in it, or perhaps not. You can still be as happy or unhappy at almost any rank and station by whatever criteria you're defining or measuring such. I came to the conclusion that the wisdom of the ages, as it's understood, perhaps secularly or perhaps religiously, may actually be more a consequence of what seemed to work. A simple saying like a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush may have something to do with the most profitable attitude to uncertainty. And that uncertainty, of course, actually seems to follow everything when we are making things, when we are creative, and when we are wondering if we should be pursuing certain goals. There's always a measure of uncertainty, and doesn't necessarily lend itself to very rational thinking. Even if we think of it in terms of probability, we don't know what the probability is. We surmise what it could conceivably be. We know things aren't certain in general, but we also know things are not totally uncertain. There tends to be patterns, and we're looking for those patterns to cleave to in the hope that we get an overall better outcome in this way. So are there conceptions and values and ways of looking at things that are more helpful and profitable in living than not having such? Are they enshrined in literature that's lasted a very long time? It might be scripture typically, or might be what we have taken to be important in history. That understanding such gives us a view of why society is the way it is, or even the way society is, given what we value at present and are concerned to look for and find. So history might have been dominated by the history of kings and wars, and then it might have become dominated by, political developments, because we've got some notion of valuing democracy and how we got here. It might be dominated by a fascination with technological growth, because we find our technology very important today. So we want to sort of understand how we got to this state. We may come to the conclusion that our present world is dominated by technology, and the wishes of those with the most power. And those with the most power might be still the wealthiest. That wealth might be in terms of finance, banking, or it might be in terms of land ownership, might be in terms of political manoeuvring and position and power in society. It may be a consequence of the elites of a variety of basically people with power. And of course they may not be either individually or collectively majorly determined to improve society from the man in the street's point of view. In fact, may treat the man in the street as valuable or of no value at all, and may treat him accordingly. And because power is the way it's distributed, the outcome is then something like what we have, what we seem to have. And of course we're not terribly clear what we do have. Do I know what it's like to be homeless and living in, well, not even in a car, just on the street? Do I really know what it's like to be unemployed for years? Do I know what it's like to be alone and elderly? Have I really experienced being dominated by some people that take violent advantage of others? Do I really know the significance and importance of being sent to war and possibly dying in a very unfortunate way? Do I understand, in some sense, the significance and consequence of various things that I notice about my society in general? Do I understand the individual, their reason for living, their hopes and expectations and assurances, and how these affect their welfare and their happiness and what seems to be important to them? I don't mean that religion or philosophy has the answer, but perhaps that which it's preoccupied with gives us some clue as to what we have thought, at least in the past, to date, now, what might be important, what might have even worked but gets overlooked because of, well, the sheer complexity and jumble of life. You see, we don't understand the importance of what we are, physical being with thoughts and hopes and a great desire for happiness rather than pain and suffering. particularly able to register such as regards oneself, and rather less so as regards others, simply because we're not wired up to others in the same way as we're wired up to our own body and our own lifestyle and our own experiences. Do we really understand what we might value, be it what we call freedom or creativity and experience and understanding? In short, what is wisdom? If we come to some of the thought structures that have dominated mankind, its religions and philosophies, its wisdom, well, it seems that understanding alone might be incredibly helpful. Would the pursuit of understanding, therefore, be hopefully the place where we're going to find what we need? We find something like the Jesus story, if you like, as in the four Gospels, rather than the entire tome of the Bible, but is apparently, when you read it, preoccupied with things like the name of God. This notion of, if you like, a super person that's responsible for existence itself. And if only we understood such, well, we'd have the key to all happiness and life. What do such ancient writings commend to us? Or to imagine God, they don't put it in those terms, but to imagine God as this person, very able and very loving, to us in particular, but possibly to all life. Can only be understood in terms of what we do understand, which, even in the modern world, is still something to do with family, childhood and parenthood and friendship, love and kindness and care, hope and understanding. The Jesus story claims that this is life eternal, to know thee, the only true God, and the way, Jesus, in the Christian religion, if you're looking at that particular one, which perhaps even if you're secular, you have some sort of general knowledge of. I don't mean that you've accepted the religion. You may have never really considered it worth considering. You may have some passing knowledge of it, like lots of other interests in life. But certainly many have thought that perhaps the solution is to look to ancient writings. It might be Greek philosophy, it might be scripture of major religions, the writings of the greats of history that have apparently suggested ways of living that might be more helpful than others. What are they? What are those ways? And have we looked into it to see if some of them work much better than others? In a general way, we have. Our society has gleaned some things that society says seem to be helpful. And they are enshrined in our society's sayings and general sort of teaching. Are there some things that are particularly powerful and useful? Well, how do we detect and find such? It helps if the considered teacher is presenting a way of life that we think we would like. You know, if they seem desperately serious and depressed people and argumentative and nasty and unpleasant, well, we sort of get the impression, I don't think I want to go down that road. Whatever he's suggesting could be definitely wide of the mark of what I value. Whereas we come across someone who seems to be a blessing and a great blessing to mankind, the greats, and I now don't necessarily mean powerful greats, but possibly powerful greats that have brought about changes that we value from our present point of view. You know, we might worship wealth, aristocracy, royalty, powerful individuals that run major international corporations. We may see that as possibly that's my answer to happiness and joy. Or we may look at their life and think, well, it doesn't look quite what I'm looking for either. I'm looking for happiness and health and love and hope and joy and peace, and perhaps we get a general impression that many people do, although some people seem to love recklessness and depression and violence and domination. You know, there's quite a significant number of people that seem to be pursuant of those sort of values. We may feel, looking at the whole picture generally, and I do mean very generally and in much ignorance, that perhaps we have common needs. We all want happiness and life and freedom from pain and freedom from want and people to care for us and value us and interact with us in a very friendly and positive and helpful way. That this is something that's common to mankind generally, or should be even, because we value it. Perhaps in a very short way, 23 minutes, coming up 24 minutes then, we have covered a broad view of our grasp of things, and do therefore know the way forward. My viewers, of course, you know from an absurd number of recordings that I've made here on YouTube, is that this is so. But of course it turns on what you think personally. What's your view? And is it helpful? I've found absolutely fundamental to be my most helpful conception, as I see it, that I have, which is not my own, of course. It's come from what I've gleaned from society and experience and living, is that indeed to see God as Heavenly Dad, as the Jesus story has it, you know, John's Gospel, literally, as seeing God as all-powerful and all-loving, as a dad, in fact. A heavenly dad, of course, not a corrupt one that we might have experienced. heavenly dad or a heavenly mum or just a wonderful friend actually makes a tremendous step forward. I mean, absurdly so, you would have thought, but if he's all-powerful and loves us, then, well, it's not just the things that I appreciate as a child of God, so to speak, that are helpful to me, but the things that I don't appreciate, but nonetheless, loving parent or loving friend does for me. And perhaps I start to see the experience of life in that way. When I start to see it in that way, I may find it a tremendous blessing. Well, taste and see. Do I find it so? And how can I enter into this conception more vividly? Or by thanking God for all that is good, and then the things that are minor, that are not good. As I usually say, missing the bus, it raining, minor injury to myself, and the wonderful way the body seems to heal itself. To appreciate the loveliness of creation and life, not just focus on all that's wrong with it, but on the contrary, focus quite deliberately on all that seems to be right. And the appreciation of that starts to give us a confidence about even the minor things that are wrong, and then more major things that seem to be wrong, but perhaps looking back and determining what we value and what we don't value can have been a blessing to us. We start to have an incredible assurance and confidence about our situation of life, about the past and the future, simply by this practice of being thankful to what you might take to be a mythical, all-powerful, loving God. That it has an astonishingly good effect on your welfare and your whole being. But of course, I can't prove it to you at all easily. And even if I did, it wouldn't matter unless it's true in practice, in reality. And the only way you can find that out is to taste and see. Does seeing God as existing, being all-powerful and all-loving, and thanking him accordingly, regularly, consistently, very quickly make it clear to you the way you wish to go. Taste and see. Bless you. Thank you.